Technology.
Hey, everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Integrate This EdTech podcast. It is kind of our first episode that we've had since summer started, other than a couple of little recaps that David and I had while we were at the ISTE conference in Denver that took place last month. But we're really excited today. Perhaps you'll notice there's three of us on the screen instead of two of us. And that's because what happens when you go to a great conference like ISTE and you meet all of these other educators from all over the country, it really gives you a chance to network and meet new people and take the great things that they're doing and bring them back to our audience, which is all of you viewers here. So I'm going to turn it over to David to kind of introduce who this third person is that's with us today. So
All right,
go ahead.
thanks. So yeah, the crazy thing about ISTE was actually when I was talking to Jeremy when we did some of our recaps was that I actually went with the intention of going to a lot of AI sessions, but then as I was walking around the playground area, I saw Manuel doing some different things with various apps, and it was artistic stuff, which I was kind of drawn to because I like to do a lot with Canva. But then I was also thinking about my kids draw a ton and they do a lot of that type of stuff. And so I just kind of edged my way over there and started listening and stuff. And then it ended up actually being one of my favorite sessions, as I mentioned in the recaps that we did from ISTE. So yeah, we have with us Manuel Herrera, and he is currently working with Samsung Education. And I don't know how much that ties into the sketchnoting idea that I had come across, but we wanted to give Manuel our platform for a little while to kind of explain to all of our viewers what it is that he does and what they could do in the classroom. So, Manuel, do you mind giving us a little bit of background just to start about how you kind of got into things?
Yeah. David, Jeremy, thank you both for having me on. I'm always excited to share kind of the things that I do. But yeah, my name is Manuel Herrera. I am a former educator, so I was in education right at 20 years. My first kind of started off education middle school, so I'm a little bit crazy because it's middle school. You gotta be. But yeah, I taught in eighth grade. I taught math, and then I also taught special education. And then I coached track and cross country, and I did that for about 8 years, and I loved it, man. It's education was always something that was kind of strange for me as a kid. Just I just wasn't into it, so it's kind of a little ironic that I became a teacher. But yeah, I did that my first 7 or 8 years, and then I landed an ed tech role in my district, and I was like, wow, I want to be here. I don't know what this is. So this was probably 2009, 2010. So iPads hadn't even come out yet. We were still interactive whiteboards were kind of the jam for everybody. And that's where I started. And I've kind of been in that world ever since. So I was an ed tech coach, became an ed tech coordinator, eventually became a curriculum coordinator, and a coordinator of student services. So I've done a little bit of all of that those last 12 years. And then about 3 years ago, I stepped away. I left education and I went to work for Adobe for a little while, and kind of have the past couple of years have kind of just been outside of education, kind of looking in, but still definitely tied in. And it was kind of through that journey that I started to draw with kids and sketchnote. Yeah, it's been an interesting journey because my role was ed tech. And my part of my role was to convince teachers or share with teachers tools that are available to them, how this can enhance learning, how it can enhance creativity. But somewhere in there, I found that we really just started to put devices in front of kids and assumed that the device would do all the creativity, would do all the work. And in some cases, it did. It worked out that way, but in other cases, it didn't. And that's what led me to start drawing with kids. And we can definitely get into that a little bit. But yeah, that's a little bit of my background. I do a lot of consulting work now. So when I left education, I started consulting a little more. I started speaking. I started to, I've kind of been speaking probably for the past 10 years, but started doing more of that in consulting and working with schools and districts around visual thinking and drawing and sketchnoting. And it's been great. I've had a lot of fun. It's nice to do something you love and you're super passionate about. And even within there, illustration came out. So we can definitely talk about that because I'm also an illustrator. I've illustrated, just finished my second children's book, and excuse me, my third children's book. I finished my second one in the spring, finished my third one this summer, and I'm really excited for that to come out here in the fall. So yeah, I'm happy to share about all of that too as well.
Awesome. Well, I've been a track coach for 24 years.
Nice.
And just stepped away from that myself. Just this last spring was the first year I didn't coach, and I missed it a little bit. But I got involved with more like officiating track meets and timing track meets. So I feel like I'm still
Nice.
kind of connected to that. But definitely, I definitely relate to that. You know what you spoke to about, you know, finding that passion and getting to do the things that you're passionate about. And I think that's, you know, definitely something. I think I also followed a similar path to getting involved in the ed tech side of things, being a classroom teacher for 22 years, and then kind of transition more into this role that I have now. But it doesn't put me with the students every day, which I do kind of miss.
Yeah.
But I don't know. It's still kind of a fun area to explore and to try to think of all the possible ways to try to connect your passion to other people's passion, and you know, to all with the kind of ultimate goal in my mind of trying to help students learn, you
For
know.
sure.
And so, and that's I guess kind of the question that I have for you, right? Leads into that, you know, like if we're talking about trying to find ways to get to our students, to help them remember things, to help them connect new material to old material, right?
Mhm.
You know, like to me, you know, these ideas of you being this visual thinker and this sketchnoter, and you know, so how can the sketchnoting lead to some of those things that we want to see increases in learning from our students, right?
Yeah. You know, it really started when I was a kid. Like when I was a kid, I was the kid who doodled. I was the kid who drew in the margins back when we had book covers. You guys were, I don't know if you come from that generation, but yeah, book covers, having to do that. And I would just do it oftentimes just to focus, just to pay attention. You know, I would, you know, draw in the corners. I drew the, you know, the S or whatever, and, you know, scribble, but it was just to focus. And I really didn't know what it was. You know, you're a kid, you're just doing what you like. But I would get in trouble. You know, I'd get in you're drawing, you should be paying attention. So there were oftentimes throughout my, you know, K-12 experience, I would have to kind of put the crayons back in the box when I got caught. But then even into college, in college, I would do that. College, became more of kind of a sketch note type thing where I'm using kind of visuals and lettering and arrows and boxes to just draw what professors were saying, what I was reading, just to help me understand. And again, I didn't know that wasn't. I didn't really know what it was. I just knew that I needed to do it. But you know, my friends would make fun of me, like, "What are you like? What are you doing?" Like, I wouldn't say make fun of me, but you know, they would, you know, just ask, like, "I don't understand this. Why do you do this? This seems so much harder than just listening." I'm like, I just need it, you know. And so I did that for a long time, and eventually just stopped because, you know, I'm done with college. I'm moving on in life, and you know, having a career. And then I started teaching again, or I started teaching. And when I started teaching, especially when I taught 8th grade special ed, I would have kids who I would often have to reteach things to. So I started off teaching in Texas. So I'm originally from Texas. Oh, I didn't mention that. I'm originally from Texas. I live in St. Louis, Missouri now. Sorry, we totally skipped over that. But yeah, I live in St. Louis. But in Texas, when I was teaching, I taught inclusion. So I was pushing into classrooms with different groups of kids. And my kids, often we would have to pull out and then reteach and kind of go over concepts. And what I started to do, because it was something I did to learn, is I would draw. I would draw with kids, and they kind of just watched and would draw with me. But again, I would get in trouble. I would get in trouble with teachers, and they would say, "That is not note taking. We are a Cornell note district. We need to take Cornell notes. They need to follow this formula." And so I did it secretly. Like I would just, and I'll tell a story later, but I would just do that. And it wasn't until probably when I got into the ed tech role that I really started to bring that back out again. So this is years later that I'm in ed tech and I start drawing with kids again. But then I started to research and look, well, what is it? Am I doing something? Is this? And I came across a video from Sunny Brown. She was a a visual thinker out of Austin, and she had a video, a TED Talk all about doodling, the power of doodling or something like that. And she was putting research, she was referencing examples, and she didn't quite give it a name. She was just calling it doodling. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's what I'm doing with kids. I'm doing this, and it's to help kids understand concepts, because when we teach, sometimes we'll have a visual, sometimes we will just have bullet points. And so words can kind of get lost for some students. I was that student. So kind of trying to grasp those concepts and visually create them. She's telling me, like, here's the research, here's what it says. It helps with memorization, it helps with comprehension. And it's really not about how well the drawing is done. It's just about capturing those ideas and trying to explain it. And so I was like, oh, so this sent me on the rabbit hole of what is this? And I eventually came across Mike Rohde, who had come out with a book, the Sketchnote Handbook. And it was all about visual thinking. It was all about sketchnoting. It was all the research. Your brain processes information faster with visuals. And when you're trying to capture content in a visual way, you're using more part of your brain. So it helps with memorization. There are studies that show even random doodling while you're listening, you will be able to retain more information that you're hearing, as opposed to just hearing it and then trying to recall it later. So now I've got some like teeth in this, right? I'm like, all right, we're going all in. And I'm just starting to do it more with kids. I'm not necessarily asking them just yet. I'm just kind of doing it with them as I'm teaching, as I'm talking, as I'm listening to them. And it really was this one instance where I had a group of kids. So my role was an ed tech coordinator, and I had a classroom at the high school that was kind of a come and go classroom. We had all the tech in there. So all the GoPros, all the tripods, all the 3D printers, laser etchers, we had everything. And so kids would come in for projects. And I had a group of kids that came in and they said, hey, Herrera, we need to use your 3D printer. And I said, okay, cool. What are you guys going to make? And they're like, I don't know, it's for our science class, and we're gonna like put this thing together, right? It's gonna have this like tube, and we need it to have. And they're like, no, it's gonna have this other thing. And so I was like, all right, let's go sit down. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, you don't know what you want to do. And I just draw things that I hear them saying, and they're like, yeah, okay, okay, add this other piece. And then the other kids grabbed markers and started contributing to this. And that really was like, yes, okay, there's a process we're missing when we're asking kids to use really cool technology. And so it was really, in that instance, a design process, just using sketching. But then I started to apply it to everything else, like I had done when I was teaching, for note-taking, presentations, videos, any of that stuff. We started with drawing. And sometimes it was, trying because they were trying to remember something or learn something. Sometimes it was they were trying to design something. Sometimes it was just they were problem solving. But seeing all the pieces really helped everybody, because this isn't like a strategy for struggling learners. This isn't a strategy for any particular group, because I've worked with AP Lit classes and they've used sketchnoting, and I showed one in my presentation, a drawing. It's really for everybody who would benefit from it. And there are some kids that are like, bullet points are my jam. Cool, that's great. But we have other kids in the class. So that's really kind of how this all started. It was really like a lot of getting in trouble and just kind of being persistent with it, because I knew it worked for me. And then once I ran into Sonny Brown, Mike Rohde eventually coined sketchnoting. That was when, okay, cool. I can do this because here's the proof that I needed for all the teachers, the administrators, the parents, whomever it might be, that it's not just drawing. We're not just creating art. We're really thinking and working together. That was a long answer, but that's kind of how this all really started. And yeah.
It makes a lot of sense, because I think like so I remember when I taught, I taught for years, and a lot of the stuff when you do note taking was, it doesn't take long till you get to like information overload. And I think for myself, even, you in the process of taking a bunch of notes, I think I always, even if you feel like you've accomplished something in the note taking, whenever you come back to it, it's really hard to figure out where is what, and what are the things that I want to come back to, because there's just so much information in a given topic. And I think one of the things that I really thought about when I was watching your session was, to me, in my mind, it almost seemed like even though there's a bunch of stuff on the page, it actually seemed more organized because you could almost like in your mind chunk the different sections. Like when you had your page up there, I could look at each different piece and understand that it's a concept of itself, even though it might be like a smaller part of a larger picture. It was easier to organize in my own mind, like what was going on. Um, is there a place? I know you say you got in trouble and stuff, but for teachers teachers that want to introduce this to students or offer it as an option, so if you're a kid that likes taking your Cornell notes, great, but here's an alternative. Is there a place that you would recommend that they start just for themselves to learn about it, or to get their students started on it?
Yeah, I would highly recommend them check out. I mentioned him earlier, Mike Rohde. Mike Rohde, his Sketchnoter's Handbook. It's fantastic. It's easy. It's a short book. It's very visual, but he breaks down exactly what you were saying, like chunking and putting some kind of structure to that. Eventually, you'll get there. I think the first hurdle is just drawing and putting something on paper other than just your words. But he has a great book. I mean, it's kind of the book everybody goes to. And he's still around doing talks and doing speaking, but his Sketchnoting Handbook really breaks down visuals. It then helps you, okay, now how do I structure that? And it gives you some options. And it's up to you, it's up to the teacher, it's up to each individual student. What's my better structure? For me, my structure is just kind of chunking stuff and throwing it on the page. And if I got to connect it, I'll just use a line. It's a lot of spatial reasoning, and sometimes that can be very intimidating when you have a blank page. So yeah, I would highly recommend his book, his work. The other one is for great videos would be Verbal to Visual. It is a YouTube channel. The guy's name is escaping me because I always think Verbal to Visual, but he breaks it down as well. And he's got a camera above him and he's got his hand and he's drawing things and he's showing you examples and structure. Those are probably my two go-to. But once those guys, obviously I came across Mike Rohde first, and then eventually Doug Nielsen, I think is his name, Doug something, from Verbal to Visual. It's like, okay, cool. This is kind of reinforcing what I'm already doing. It's helping me and giving me a place to send teachers, because I'm not necessarily creating videos. It's just hard. You got to have the time to do it, and but those two guys definitely would be incredible resources. And neither one are educators, but yet speak to educators. So yeah.
Okay,
I
great.
found both of them just Googling them right now. So
Yeah,
they're going to be bookmarked and on my list of things to check out here too.
And Mike Rohde has a podcast. So what I like about his podcast is he talks to everybody. It's not educators. It is people out in other industries and how it's being used there, which really helps with how is this useful? Well, when kids leave school, they're gonna be in other industries, and it is being used there in other industries. So cool podcast as well. I think it's Sketchnote Army is his podcast.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize too that you've probably seen sketchnoting, because like I know that I've seen videos of complex topics or even school topics where on YouTube there has been videos of sketchnoting, and it just kind of the video is moving through the process, and so I think people are probably more familiar than they even realize with it, because you've probably seen a video or two that resembles the same thing.
For sure. And it can easily be kind of a double-edged sword when it comes to sketchnoting, which I definitely try. Part of my talks or my workshops are just kind of easing the anxiety around drawing, because when you do Google sketchnoting and you just go to an image search, there's very beautiful artwork. I would consider artwork as an illustrator, like that is very beautifully done. And for some teachers, they're like, I can't do that. I'm not an artist. I'm not. So I try to say it doesn't have to look like that. Oftentimes those are created, even the ones that I created are for the purposes of it's going to go on social media, or somebody has paid you to do that, to create a piece of artwork. And I can show some examples. It doesn't look like that in the classroom necessarily. It can be very much simplified version of that. And so I love it, but if you're not careful with it, it could easily no, I don't want to do that. If you don't want to dig any further, it can definitely be intimidating.
maybe it's a good point to show some of those for if you have some of them
Yeah.
handy here.
I do. I can.
And we can put them up on the screen, and and maybe that entry level then for a teacher who's a little bit apprehensive about it just becomes that much easier to manage.
For sure. Yeah, I'll put these here, and whenever you guys want to ready to share them, I can definitely speak to them.
Here's a part where we'll trim.
All right. I'm gonna show these. Yeah.
Hide this so you see a little more of the screen.
Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what I mean. So these are sketch notes that I created. I consider these artwork. I spent time. I drafted them. They came out. I can put them out as sketchnoting, which is fine. But it's it takes some time in the process. If you were to Google, and this may be blurry, if you Google sketchnote, this is what I was saying. You're going to see very similar things, but that's not necessarily what it needs to look like. It's not about art. This is also sketchnoting. I'm not sure how well this comes up, but the black ink is me. I'm teaching a fifth grade class how to sketchnote and what it means, and we kind of just did a mind map on a character in a book they were reading, Home of the Brave, and so the main character is Keck. I came in the classroom, I don't know, I guess a week after they had already started reading the book. And I said, hey guys, just tell me about Keck. What do you know about the main character? And I just created this simple mind map and these icons of what they knew about Keck. He had a pet cow named Goal. He called the television a magic box. His airplane that he flew on was a magic book. So we just kind of did this. And I said, do you understand? Like, do you kind of see how this is all working? They're like, yeah, it works. And what I did in this example is I printed this. I had a poster printer. I printed it really, really large. And I sent 5 of them to the classroom. And so the rest of the page was blank. And I said, okay, you fill this out. You continue as you read. Go draw. What do you see in your mind when you hear the story or read the story? Again, I'm not sure how good this comes up, but these are the kids' drawings. This is very simple. This is pencil. I usually tell teachers, just give kids 1 marker, 1 crayon, 1 pencil. Don't give them the colors. They'll spend more time creating art. This is another example of, this is sketchnoting. This is from Kim Zajac. She's a speech and language pathologist I've done work with. We've presented together on this. And this is her students kind of doing the about me activity at the beginning of the school year. But these are students who struggle with communication, whether it's verbal or written, and using drawings to kind of express themselves. And they became these visual prompts for kids, because then they would then present them and they would hold them in front of themselves. And so they could read off of their cue card in a sense, if you will. But as a teacher, I can help them organize that because I see everything that's on their page. I can also learn about those kids, because if I'm there watching kids draw, chances are I'm going to remember those icons around them. And then I'll know a little bit more about my student rather than reading a narrative or reading. This is probably one of my favorite ones. This is that AP Lit class I was telling you about. This is The Great Gatsby, sketchnoted. That is, it's a hot mess, but if you started with the one character and then you watched it grow and you watch it grow and you watch it grow, it made sense. I would never hand a student and say, here you go study. But Troy, the teacher in the classroom, was like, it was pretty interesting to watch them create this. They came up with the imagery. They even printed off memes and pinned those to the boards. And so what was interesting is when we erased this to kind of prepare for the assessment, the kids would recall the information, and as they were answering questions, they would point to the blank places on the board where that was drawn. And he's like, it was just fascinating to watch them point to those relationships that they were, creating. Sometimes it's the memory that they create. It may not necessarily be related to the content, but they attach that memory to that event that was, they were referencing. So sometimes it could be silly and have no meaning, but you make a connection. I kind of think about it as smells. When you smell certain scents, it recalls memories. That's how it works. So it doesn't have to be, really pretty planned out stuff. And this is often what we will see when you look it up or you start to research it. But like I said, Mike Rohde does a really good job, and I'm happy to share some of the things that I teach kids and teachers how to make it, just become comfortable with drawing.
Would you say that there's more of an emphasis on like not that someone else couldn't understand what you're trying to get across with your sketch note, but like it seems to me that the concept is more, what do you need to draw, or how do you see things to be able to process it and better understand it or come back to it? Would you say there's more of an emphasis on that, or is there a part that maybe we don't know about that lends itself to other people being able to understand it?
Well, it's a very personal thing. It's an individual thing. In that example, they did use it as a class to see how it works, because eventually you want those kids to kind of take that, I guess, skill and kind of apply it to their own learning. So they're doing it by themselves individually. That's eventually what it becomes. It's great. It's a group activity, and it's a great way to learn. And you could also apply that to maybe classroom discussions as well. But in the end, I feel like it's a very individual thing. And if you're never sure, I've seen teachers, there was a teacher in middle school who used it as an assessment. So as they had each read individual books, but then they had to create these basically story maps of what it is they read. And you look at them, it's kind of hard to understand because that student drew it how they saw it, but the teacher would sit with the students and say, walk me through this. And so they would recall and point and share, and the teacher's like, okay, this makes sense. Like, especially, younger kids, their drawing isn't always that great, or even older kids, so sometimes that fire hydrant was really a tree, kind of thing. So you want to still have conversations. You want to still have conversations. You still want to use text. You want to use handwriting as well. It's not all drawing. It is a mix of drawing, handwriting, arrows, lines. It's a mix of a little bit of everything. And so kids find, even adults find their comfort zone with like, this is what I need. And maybe I only needed it for this one concept within this entire unit. Great, fine. You don't have to use it at all times. You kind of find where it fits.
I know one of the things that you talked about a little bit earlier too, and maybe it's the right time to throw this one in there, but and I can even see you're holding a pencil in your hand,
yeah,
right? So these very low tech ways, of helping to sketchnote, but you can also do some of that stuff digitally. Do you find that there's a lot of carryover, say from, the pencil paper type of sketchnote into transitioning and doing some of that even in a digital manner too? Or is there a preferred method, or is it up to the individual?
I definitely would say it's up to the individual. But if you were, I was very much paper pencil. That's just what I grew up with. That's how I created art when I was younger. And so it just was easy. It's accessible. We have paper. I always tell teachers, you don't have to buy anything. You can go to your copy center or copy room, steal a ream of paper, and use that with pencils and paper. But yeah, there are digital tools, and making that transition, it's an individual thing. Like you can do it. For me, it was hard because now I have the undo button, and so as I make a stroke, I can undo it. I didn't like that one, or I didn't like the way that was written, and so I can undo. So it took some time to kind of get over that and just like commit to the line, commit to what I've drawn, like you have to do typically with markers and paper. So it takes some time, because then now I can make my art exactly how I want it, because again, I can draw it again. I can draw it again. I can draw it again. So it's a tough thing, but I would never tell teachers buy anything, but you do have tools that teachers typically use in the classroom. So like Canva, Figma, Adobe Express, Book Creator. Those are already apps that a lot of classroom, Google Draw, those are already apps that teachers are using in the classroom. And they all have drawing apps within them. So you don't learn anything new. Don't go buy anything necessarily. Try with what you have first. See where it fits. See how does it make sense, or should I just be giving my kids paper and pencil and giving them kind of a break from the digital world for a little bit? There's lots of opportunities. The move from one to the other, it was hard for me. Again, just because of the undo. But if you want to start digital, that's great. You also have, I'm pointing because there's one behind me, interactive panels. Like everybody has interactive panels or smart boards or Promethean boards. Use those, draw on those like you normally would, but now maybe instead of having a presentation up there, maybe just start with a blank board and draw. Dry erase boards. I had a classroom The classroom I was at the high school with all the tech in it, we had put whiteboards everywhere. And it was just as easy as like, hey, let's come chat. And then we would just grab a dry erase board and start talking. And even I do. I mean, you can see I move my hands a lot. Like I'm always like visualizing something that I'm drawing. And it for me, it was easy to do, but I understand how it can be tough for other teachers. But kids will copy what you write. Kids will see. I don't spend a whole lot of time, or I wouldn't spend a whole lot of time sharing, oh, I'm not a good artist, or I can't draw, or don't mind. Just do it. Just draw. The kids are going to think what they think and just keep going. But if you just draw it and it's making sense, now they're making that connection. They're like, oh, now I see it. Now it makes sense to me. I'm not even worried about my teacher can't draw. So yeah, it's there's a lot of options for teachers. But definitely don't run out and buy anything. The plus about digital is now you have a digital copy of it that's accessible that you can share. I can embed links. So especially I use something like Canva, Book Creator. Now I can embed a link. Like I've kind of scripted out a concept, but let's put a link to a video that might explain it further. That's kind of the nice thing about digital. And again, that's like, later down the road once you become comfortable, because it's just another couple of steps that you have to do. But yeah.
If you were to so I know, and maybe you don't mind pulling your screen up again to show us. I do remember when I was watching your presentation, kind of along the lines of what you said with just getting started with it. And maybe you've got one of your kind of go-to tools, but is there a go-to tool that you have where you could show us your concept of, I believe it was 5 or 6 shapes you kind of mentioned, that you said anybody can do this because if you can draw these 5 or 6 shapes, this is where you kind of start. Do you mind showing us that concept?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, building confidence with teachers is a tough thing, but I always tell them, like, let's draw these simple shapes. And it's, a square, a circle, a triangle, some dots, a line, and kind of a blob or a kind of a squiggle. If you can draw these simple shapes, I mean, you can draw just about anything for the purposes of explaining a concept. And this is really all you need to know how to draw. Because depending on what it is, you kind of, the image that you're trying to create, if you can in your mind break it up into shapes and kind of put it back together using these shapes, it becomes easier. I will say it takes some time. So for example, if I'm going to be talking about maybe a city that's in a book, or maybe it's a setting of a place, and I just want to draw it because we're going to draw a story map, right? We're going to create a timeline of a book we're reading. I'm just using rectangles or squares and lines. And I've created kind of this cityscape of some sort, but that's my setting of my story. And if I need to, I can do this. I can also label it. I don't have to just rely on it. But now I'm kind of grounded this image in this, the story. And now we're traveling somewhere, and we're going from St. Louis to Colorado, and we were just in Denver. And now I need to create some mountains. And these are just triangles, and here are my blobs. But I'm not trying to be super artistic. Yes, I've drawn these things over and over and over again. And I have this, you eventually develop a visual library in your head of images that you can recall. And sometimes these are going to be very content specific. But sorry that I'm trying not to move this a lot. But yeah, so now if I need to, I can write Denver, or I can write, well, I guess that's not Denver. I can write the mountains. And if I need to put a cityscape in here, I can, but keeping things simple. Planets are always, easy to draw, circles, trees. I can use any of those shapes and then just draw a line with it, and I get a tree. So even just changing up your trees, and usually I kind of add some branches but I'm not too worried about color just yet. I'm just trying to get a concept out of my head onto paper in some way. I usually have kids, practice food. So here's my pizza. That's just a triangle. Things that see, there's my undo. See, like I didn't draw that one line perfect, so I had to go. But that's just, my habit at this point. But yeah, I like squares. I use squares and boxes for a lot of things. So this could be a cereal box. I work with kids in engineering classes, and we talk about drawing isometric drawings. So we always draw butter because we have to draw it in 3 dimensions. But I can, draw butter. Little, just simple things that the idea is like, are we ever going to talk about butter in class? No. But did I have fun drawing butter? Yeah. And so hopefully I'm having fun doing simple things like this that makes it exciting for me. And so then I'm probably going to be a little more willing to continue doing it. But science concepts, if we're talking about, lab safety, we're going to have to be able to label all these, beakers and graduated cylinders. And, but they're just simple shapes that I'm creating, that I've drawn over and over again. Computers, I draw computers all the time for whatever topic, digital citizenship or, safety. But again, you'll build that library. It's fun because then you'll, in these sessions, I'll have people like, give me something to draw and I'll try to draw, the best I can. So for example, one of these, they said justice. I was like, oh man, like, how do I draw justice? Like, because concrete things are easy to draw. I can look on my desk, I can draw this microphone, I can draw the laptop, I can draw a lamp, but justice, how do I draw justice? Well, in my head, I think justice, I think of, Lady Justice with the scale in her hand, right? And she's blindfolded. So then this gets me into people. How do I draw people? Simple shapes. Sometimes we draw people like this. This is probably a pretty standard human that we might draw. But it's hard because if I need to create certain features, it's a little hard because their body is so thin that I start to play this game to try to put clothes on them. And it just doesn't come out like I want it. So what I just started to do was I started to draw the head, the circle, and I would draw the body like this. I would just create kind of this open square. No particular reason. You can close it if you want to. And then you draw the feet. And the reason I do this is because now I have this whole area in the chest that I can, I can write whatever it is I need to write. I can put an icon in there. If I need to draw another person, maybe their garment is a little bit longer. But now I have this whole area to add, whatever it is I need to. So when it came to justice, okay, justice is a lady. She's got like a robe or a gown. So I said, okay, so I'm going to draw this head. And I drew this kind of gown thing, and it's, little flowy feet, the hands, and then she's holding that scale. Again, this isn't perfect. And then she's blindfolded. Done. Justice. That is not the most perfect example of justice, but again, I'm creating a memory and a connection to that. And if I need to, however I'm referencing it in this talk, I can add more context, more imagery around it, or maybe we can say, well, what are the elements of justice that we enjoy? And so now it becomes a mind map, and I can draw that out. And maybe that's the only drawing I do. I tell teachers, just maybe just start with one thing and just do it and see what kids' reactions are to that. Because then you might, expand that to the next concept tomorrow. Don't overwhelm yourself. Keep things simple. I'm going to continue kind of expanding this canvas a little bit.
The people are giving me crash course world history vibes.
Yeah, people, and if you have to draw a lot of people, you just kind of do some humps, and then you give them heads. And if they need some, specific clothing, you can kind of add that. I don't ever put hair if I'm doing a bunch of people. So when I was teaching, this is the story I was talking about earlier. My kids, who I would pull out of class, reteach, we'd redraw. Branches of government was always really tough because they had to know the branches of government, then who was in them, their term limits, how many people. And so typically we gave kids the graphic organizer and they just labeled it, right? And so what I would do is I would actually draw the graphic organizer for them and with them. So we would start with the buildings. So we'd say the legislative branch. Cool. The legislative branch, and we would look the buildings up and have an image of them. Like roughly, this is the legislative branch. It's at the Capitol. That's what the Capitol kind of looks like. Then you have the executive branch. These guys are always, they're hanging out at the White House. And so this is the executive branch. I can't spell. And then you had the judicial branch, and they're at the Supreme Court. They are at the courthouse, and that's what the courthouse looks like. Oh, these have windows. And then we would kind of branch off from there. So legislative branches has 2 houses. We would draw literally 2 houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then, the Senate has, 50 senators, 100 senators. We would just continue. It is a graphic organizer, but we're using this visual. And my kids would just copy this. They would just write with me. We'd stop. I wouldn't go this fast by any means. We have the president and the vice president. Judicial branch has 9, so I wouldn't draw 9 individual people. We would do this. And, at the time, I drew ties on the men. The women had scooped necks just so we knew how many men, how many women. And we would do this. And anytime we would reference, if they'd ask a question about the president or they'd ask a question about the Supreme Court justices, I would draw and kind of work my way down till I got to where it is that they needed, what they wanted to discuss. And they kind of created this memory. So when my kids went to take the test, the first thing they did was they flipped their test over and they drew this whole thing out. And the other kids were like, what's going, like, what? Like, why are they doing that? I'm like, I don't know. Your teacher said I couldn't do it with you, So little things like this, just making sense of everything. Because if you just say the legislative branch, the executive branch, those words just hang out in the air for some kids and for some adults. But when I can at least kind of ground it into something, fantastic. My teacher in high school did this. I still remember this. Do you know what that is?
Tree and water.
It is a tree and this is a squirrel. And anywhere that squirrel can be in relationship to that tree is considered a preposition. So that squirrel can be inside the tree, it can be above the tree, it can be below the tree, it can be around the tree, it can be on the tree. Like that was just something she taught, and she used a visual. So for me, because her big thing was us ending sentences in prepositions when we wrote and when we spoke. And so she would always draw this drawing, and it just stuck. It's a silly drawing, but it sticks. It makes it stick, and I can recall it. I don't ever have to use it now as an adult, but when I was writing in school, that was a visual that would come to my mind. But yeah, practice. I always tell teachers, practice what's on your desk. You got your coffee cups that are on your desk. You've got I'm sure every teacher has their Stanley cup. You just draw the things. Draw your phone. Phones are getting harder and harder because there's less things on a screen now, or less things there. But just draw the things that you see. And again, you're just trying to have fun. You just want to have fun. Don't make it stressful. Don't make it hard. Just have fun with it. And eventually that'll start to trickle into the work that you're doing. But this is also kind of the nice thing about digital is I can do things like this, and now I have more space.
Yeah.
But again, I would never, don't go buy Procreate. Don't spend money on an iPad if you don't have it. Pencil paper first. If you still have a document camera, that works too. Kids can actually, it's hard for you to see because you don't see my hand hitting the paper and where I'm going to draw. It's like all of a sudden the drawing just kind of pops up. With document cameras, kids can see you draw, or with an interactive whiteboard, kids can see where you're drawing and what you're drawing, and as you're making those strokes. Practice everyday objects. Start with story maps. Do story maps. Just create a line and just start with the beginning of the story and draw major events. And, and that's the end of it. Yeah, and just do that. I mean, history, we always do timelines, right? You could do this with just about anything you're teaching. I like one of the timelines that I saw a student create. I'm going to erase all this just for room. Is using visuals as opposed to creating a timeline like this with a start and an end. I'm going to change colors just for dramatic effect. She would draw her timeline. It was a timeline of her life, and she would draw. And if she had a low point, she actually made it a low point. And then when she had a high point that was exciting in life, and maybe life stood up here for a while, and then it kind of went back down to kind of everything was normal. That visual right there just adds so much more to a timeline. Like this was like, grandparents passed away. I don't know how to, well, that's tombstone's terrible, but great things were, I got a dog, so awesome. But it's this visual that helps even memorize events, precipitating events in history. Like, was that a low point in history? Was that a mediocre point? Well, now we're talking about perspective. It might have been a low point for this person. It might have been a great thing for this, little things like that. Dogs, because I said dog, animals. Animals are, this is how I draw my animals when I'm explaining things to kids, if I need to explain. A rectangle, some legs, and then you add a head. And you can literally just change out the head and the tail depending on what your animal is. Again, I'm not trying to create art. I'm just like, cool, we're talking about dogs in a story, or we're talking about, you can even use the blob for, a sheep in a story. But that's it. We're just trying to, like, not the most perfect thing, but you can still label things. Yeah. That was kind of fast. All of that was fast, but that's the idea, is have fun. Kids will do it. Kids are great. Younger kids are great. It's hard because sometimes you want to take the art out of the kid because the kid wants to put all the detail into things. I don't really have a strategy. Your kids best. You know what kind of conversations might help them think a little more simply, or trying to get your ideas out. But this also leads to brainstorming. What does brainstorming look like? How do I brainstorm? How do I write ideas quickly? Well, now I know how to draw some things pretty quickly. So now maybe I can brainstorm a little quicker.
Cool. Thanks for showing that.
Yeah, no problem.
I think it's really good for people to understand that you can start with very simple concepts, and you don't have to be the best drawer in the world to be able to accomplish it.
And I like too how the fact, like, hey, maybe that drawing that I just did, maybe it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to exactly, but it means something to me. And if I just write sheep, like over the top of it, right? Now I've identified what it is. Like, I can go back and like, oh yeah, my sheep sucks, but at least I know I was talking about a sheep. And I'll remember that a little bit. But
I did an activity with some middle school kids, and we were doing triangular trade kind of during, colonial era. And I was drawing my crappy rendition of the U.S., and then I would label the colonies, and then I would draw England, and then I drew Africa, and then I would go around to the kids and see what they were drawing, just to kind of see what they were doing. And this one girl just drew 3 circles and labeled them 13 colonies, E for England, and A for Africa. And I was like, why did you draw it like that? She's like, well, you just wanted us to make sure we knew who was trading, what they were trading, because then we labeled things on the lines. She's like, I didn't need to necessarily draw the U.S., right? And I was like, no, as long as that makes sense to you and you can see it, great. And, she drew the icons for the different commodities that they were trading, but she didn't worry about, like, I was like, I'm going to draw the United States, even though I'm only going to.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so
it's like, oh, my Virginia, what happened there?
And so it's fun to do gallery walks with kids when you do stuff like this. Like, give them some of the concepts. Maybe you're going to want them maybe start sketchnoting, or at least sketching something. I would give them time. Like, here are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Let's draw them first, simply, and just let them kind of draw those, because then when you go to maybe take notes and actually start the teaching, they've kind of at least have that image in their head now. You kind of support them. You kind of help them along. So it's a little quicker, but it's good to do gallery walks, because some kids will draw things very simple and you're like, yes, I should have done. Transportation doesn't always have to be a plane, a car. It could just be railroad tracks, or a train could, little things like that. Some kids will just, and use it, take it, like, awesome. This is a simple way to draw this idea. This is how, Jeremy did it. This is how David did it. Like, just as an option for other kids. Especially those kids that are like, I don't want to draw all this. I'm just going to draw even simpler. Great. Awesome. You helped us actually by doing that. So gallery walks are fun to do with kids and teachers as well.
Cool. Is there so I'm kind of wondering if there's a favorite sketchnote project that you've ever done or been a part of. I mean, either with kids or your own personal one, or both.
I would say one of the most interesting ones that I've done recently is I'm also kind of the in-house sketchnoter for a design firm in New York, Rosenfeld Media. And so I get to sketchnote their speakers at a conference. I've probably done 4 or 5 of them. And it's interesting. because I'm these are other industries that I'm having to learn, and other concepts and things in industry that I am not necessarily familiar with. So these are all designers of all sorts, and from the operation side to the actual designing, physical designing side. I like it. It's fun. It's fun to see and then share with them what I've done, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing!" Like, just to hear them give me feedback on something, that I captured that they said. That's for sure my favorite, and probably one of the hardest ones, because I'm not familiar necessarily with all of the things they're gonna say. So I will have to, there's times where I'm just like, okay, a thing is gonna go here. Let me go research that. And then I'll have to go look, what does that even mean? And so those have been fun. Like I've really enjoyed those professionally, just getting outside of education, building a library in my head of new things that I can use. But man, I always like working with kids. Watching kids use this for like pre-writing activities is a lot of fun. Teaching kids storyboarding, I that's an activity I do with kids, and I love it because you're teaching them how to break up a story or break up a narrative into pieces, chunk it, and when they do that, they add so much more detail in a drawing than they will in their writing. So when you ask them, hey, write more detail, you can reference, hey, you reference like your bedroom. Why don't you talk about your comforter? Look at all the stuff on your comforter you drew. It's like this theme. Or you didn't mention that cat on the chair in the kitchen when by the door. What's that about? Like, talk about that. Like you have things to actually point to. Otherwise, you're trying to pull stuff out of kids' heads that it's not always forthcoming, or they forget. But drawings, you see detail. So it's really cool. It's really cool to do that. So with kids, definitely storyboarding stories is fun. I'm trying to think of any other ones. So
What about your projects you have going as an illustrator?
oh man, those have been a blast. Like, I started doing sketchnoting and in working with kids, and it really started from there. I started publishing those or putting those on social media, not publishing, but putting them on social media, and really receptive people were receptive, asking questions. And then I started to sneak in my own drawings, because then I just started to draw more, kind of like back when I was a kid. I started to draw more, and I started to share those, and people were like, oh, this is great. Oh, hey, can you draw this for me? And it really kind of just snowballed from there. Like I got, draw my pet, draw my team, draw my face. Can you draw these things? Can you draw this character? And then it just led to networking and getting, people to share things. And then eventually somebody reached out and said, hey, I work for this publishing company. We are looking for illustrators. Your name came up. Would you be interested in being listed as an illustrator? And I'm like, sure. I never really kind of thought of myself in that sense. Like, imposter syndrome is real. And so I put it on there, and they're like, cool. I'd never illustrated a kid's book before. I didn't know how to illustrate a kid's book. But you kind of, you just go and research and you look. And then I reached out to people. And because I had that one book, I led to the next book. And then I recently I started posting things online, sketching podcasts. I was sketching podcasts that I'm listening to and the things I'm hearing, post them, tagging people, and they would reach out like, hey, can you do this for us for this? And it's kind of just gone from there. It's been a lot of fun. I just recently, I'm in St. Louis, Illinois is literally right there. So there's a visitors bureau, and they reached out and said, hey, can you do an illustration, a map of this particular area? It's going to go in our visitors guide. I did it for them. The other visitors bureau downstate said, hey, you did it for them. Can you do it for us? And can you do a mural? So I said, ooh, sure. So I learned how to do a 15 by 4 foot, illustrate a 15 by 4 foot mural that they're putting in their office next week. So
cool.
Yeah, it's
really cool.
Fortunate, a lot of hard work, excited, but it's been fun. So it's hard because that's when I say I'm busy and I can't make videos. I'm busy and I can't make videos. But I like it because then I get to talk to those people about drawing and how it works. And, if you have kids, this is how it could work. So I get to, share with it outside of education.
Cool. Got one more question for you.
Sure.
If you could collaborate with any artist or, writer, past or present, Who would that be? Who would be like your favorite one that you would?
I'm a big Oliver Jeffers fan. I don't know if Oliver Jeffers is a children's book. He's an artist and a children's book writer. He wrote The Day the Crayons Quit. I don't know if you guys.
Oh yeah,
yeah. And I got to meet him. He was in Chicago doing a talk. He's one of my favorite illustrators, or I guess artists. And I would love to do something with him. Like that would be really, really cool. I mean, it seems like a nice, genuine guy. I like the things that he has to say. I like the art that he creates. He's a painter as well. I mean, he's a full-on artist, does it in a variety of mediums, but he makes it look like it's so simple. Yet, I've watched videos of him create stuff. I'm like, no, that's okay. Yeah, he put some work behind that, kind of thing, and I like that. That would probably be somebody who I would love to spend time with and kind of pick their brain and get to create something with them for sure.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. Well, we're coming up on an hour here of recording time. Like it went really, really fast. But I've got to get my last question in here too.
Sure.
As I really like to cook, and I think my tacos, at least for my family, they're just your standard ground beef, and
Sure.
and they eat them up. My son just can't get enough of them, but I want to take my taco game to the next level here.
For sure.
What can you recommend to me on how to amp it up and make them a little bit more special?
A recipe that I use a lot, and it's crockpot, so it's even easier, is if you Google, it is copycat recipe for Chipotle's barbacoa tacos.
Oh.
It does not taste like barbacoa at Chipotle at all. I don't think it does. But they are delicious and they're spicy, and you can always adjust it because you're putting peppers in there. You can always adjust it. I love it. You put a bunch of stuff in the blender and then you put all the meat into a crock pot. 6 hours later, you've got a ton of it. So those are my favorite to make. My kids like them. I'll even make some homemade tortillas, which I've been working on my tortilla game for a little while. Yeah,
I've considered trying to do that too. I've got this flat top Blackstone grill that
perfect.
I think would work pretty well for that.
Yeah, whatever you do, don't use a tortilla press. I try to use a tortilla press. It doesn't press them thin enough, and then you end up having to roll them out. But yeah, that Blackstone would be perfect. Like I'm still using like a skillet. I need to go get a iron like Okomala. I need to get one of those. But barbacoa tacos. Look them up. Copycat recipe. Or I'll find it. I'll send it. And I love them. My kids love them. I love them. My girlfriend loves them. And it's a lot. I mean, it makes a lot. So yeah, definitely try that. That will be a completely different taco for sure.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome. You gave me a weekend idea here.
Let me know, man. Let me know if you make them. Just let me know how you.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
I think we need to in our description we'll put all of Manuel's contact and books and everything, and right under that we'll put the rest for the tacos. So
yeah.
Perfect.
So
well,
go ahead.
Oh, it's your turn.
Thanks, Manuel, for taking the time, and I think a lot of people will get some great ideas from this, and we'll continue to spread sketchnoting and make it more and more widely used among teachers and students, hopefully. So
awesome. Well, thanks guys for having me. I mean, like I said, I get excited to share this. I mean, it's fun. So yeah, let me know how else I can help.
Well, I think we'll look for you in San Antonio next summer.
I will be there. I grew up in Texas, man. Wear shorts, wear flip-flops, and wear t-shirts. I mean, it's gonna be hot.
Got it.
Holy cow.
But if you ever make it up to the Minnesota area, give us a shout out too. And
I will, man. I need to.
Yeah.
I think the closest I've gotten, we took a family vacation last minute to Lake Okoboji, which is it's an northern part of Iowa. And I drove up to Minnesota just to say I was there, and I came right back. It was like 20 miles away or something like that. So yeah, definitely need to come up that way, man.
Well, cool. Well, thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Enjoy your vacation. Enjoy the rest of your summer too.
You too, guys. Take care.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
All right. Hey, David, that was fantastic. What great concepts and great ideas. And I don't know, it got me really excited that whenever he would mention somebody by name, I definitely jumped on my other screen and started finding out more about them too. So I'm excited to dig deeper into a lot of the things that he was talking about. So, yeah, I don't know. Any other thoughts that you had here?
Yeah, I plan to look at up some of the sketch writers that he had mentioned. I know with the illustration stuff that that book is familiar. I didn't know who it was that did it, but yeah, that's definitely something I need to do. And we'll in the description, like I said, we'll put everything down there. So for anybody that's interested in checking out any of those things that were mentioned during the podcast, we'll make sure we link those up so that you can just directly access them. So that was great. I went super
Yeah,
fast, so
super fast. Yeah.
really
Um,
engaging.
right. And so we don't have anything planned right now for our next episode. So, but you can look for something here. David and I each have our conferences that are coming up that we're hosting. Ours in our neck of the woods of Minnesota is called Lake Ekmek. It's coming up on August 6th, and you have one coming up on August 8th.
Yeah, we'll be with you, and then right after we'll do ours. So, and that's in Worthington, Minnesota, at the high school, and so everything's coming really fast. It's going to be here pretty quick. So,
Right. And I'm sure we'll do something after one or both of those. Or maybe just one combined one after we're both done and recuperated from hosting a conference, which is a lot of work.
yep.
So
Technology.